It's written correct, so it means growth of lowest performing 25%, and it counts 10%. The parentheses are what they count. And the top one is the new one that just suddenly happened, and the bottom one is what it was supposed to be. And the,
Trying to read it.
no, I know, that's why I wanted it printed, so y'all could like more easily look at it. And then the first page is the K through 8, and the second page is high school. So, one that just suddenly got changed this month is top, and what was years in the making is bottom.
I'm really short, so I'm probably making it worse.
At least I can see your face, because last week I couldn't see anybody the way we're.
Meeting to order, if everyone would stand for.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, republic for which it stands,
One nation,
under
under
God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You would call the roll, please.
Here, Laura Harrison.
Here.
Vice Chair Jeremy Burnett. Keith Acton. Deborah Thomas. Michelle Childs.
Here.
Would like to welcome everyone.
red light.
Battery.
Yep.
I did.
Oh, did you have a red
Might
light?
have a battery issue.
Closer to it, it's supposed to pick up automatically, but it may not be. It's okay.
Technical difficulties.
Just take Jeremy.
This one work?
That's right. Again.
It just temporarily switched.
Right, is it working now?
Yep.
Okay, we'll just do that and let this one try to boot up. Sorry
Okay.
about that. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I would like to welcome everyone to our December business meeting. Dr. Horrell, will you lead us through our agenda, please?
I will. The first item is the opportunity for public comment.
Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak? Hearing none, next item.
The next item is our report section, starting with the legislative liaison update.
So last week, I gave a pretty lengthy update. Instead of going over it again right now, I would like to revisit the key points when we get to the resolution. So instead of it feeling disjointed, so I'm just gonna do that.
That sounds like a plan. I think
you.
I'm gonna have to pull this one over here. I don't think this one is still working. So we'll just do this. Okay. All right, next item.
Next item is the superintendent's report. I do have a few things I'll go over with you. I know there has been a lot of conversation about A through F letter grades. Our board has taken a position against A through F letter grades in the past. We do not, and I do not feel like it's good policy or that it accurately reflects the quality of the education that's happening in schools. This is legislation that was passed in 2016, and I know Ms. Childs is going to share some things about it later. And yet, despite our opposition, they are coming. So I did want to note that the school systems will receive, for the first time, our data that would indicate what our A through F letter grades would be for the individual schools tomorrow. We've then got a short window to file appeals if we don't think that they were calculated accurately. There'll be some webinars and a preview page that district directors can look at to see how the information will be presented. And then they will go live on the 21st. So this is a remarkably short turnaround, unfortunately, but is in kind of in keeping with the way the whole thing's been rolled out. There has not been a lot of time or discussion or opportunity to understand, but this will be the latest in that. The thing that is possibly even more, I guess, disappointing about the rollout is that the rest of the annual school report cards will not be published at the same time as the A through F letter grades. So the school report cards will not be refreshed until sometime in January, is what we're being told. So a lot of the contextual data that might help parents or community members or educators understand what's being presented in the letter grades is not being refreshed until a later date. So it's available, some of the information is available, but it's not in an easy to read format, which was supposed to be the whole idea of the letter grades. But again, kind of par for the course with what we've seen with this implementation. But that is the situation. So on the 21st, the school letter grades will go live to the community, but I will say, as we've said, and again, not having laid eyes on it, we don't believe in the school letter grades. We don't think it's an appropriate way to measure schools, and so there, as far as I'm concerned, there won't be a lot of discussion on the actual grades once they are released from our perspective. Just want to make that clear to the board and to the public. Want to move on with some things that are happening. The Annex Road work and parking are essentially complete. There's some additional fencing that's going to be installed. There's some gates. One of the swinging gates was installed in a less than ideal place, so we're going to move that. But really just touching up. The striping lines are there. The walking path has been complete. The fencing, the safety fencing on top of the retaining wall is complete. It's actually a really, really nice looking access road. One other thing we are doing right now is working on a lighting plan for that. There's not currently lights there, but we do intend to install some lights on the path and on the road. But other than that, it's pretty much done, and I think is really going to be an effective piece of our overall Lakeland Prep campus plan. The campus drive is now well underway. After a lot of time talking about it and thinking about it, they have started clearing. In fact, most of the clearing is done on the campus drive extension, and you can certainly see from 70 where that will access US 70 and where the connection will be made. The estimate right now is that that work would be done by the end of March is what we're thinking, so that we'd have access to that then. Speaking of work, the work on our Centegix emergency notification system that staff members would be able to carry on their badges is progressing. The network drops have been installed at both campuses. It will cover the annex as well. And now the more technical kind of implementation is being carried out. And the plan is for faculty and staff to be trained in January. I know no one's aware of this, but the last day before Christmas break is a week from Wednesday. And I guess I should say this is the first year where there's really kind of myriad days that different school districts are getting out. So some people may not realize that. Some school systems are out this Friday. There are some out a week from Friday. We're right in the middle. So we'll be out a half day on Wednesday, and really appreciate everybody's hard work this first semester. It's really been a strong semester. Lots of great things happening in academics, athletics, the arts, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're excited and happy for the kids and the teachers to get a little break there. There is a annual survey that's live right now, the Impact Aid Survey. Just to bring that up, we have a fairly high percentage of families that are employed by the military and work on the military base or on federal property is really what it's focusing on. But that survey is out now. We've got staff that are working on our LEA plan for next year because there's some deadlines coming up there. Student Services is getting ready for registration. That will be here before we know it, registration for 24-25. So that's well underway. I do want to note something that you may have seen the launch of. At the 5th and 6th grade at Lakeland Prep, they have a house system now, and students have been sorted into houses. And I will note that as far as we can tell, that implementation has been very successful. There's a lot of enthusiasm from the kids about earning house points and keeping up with house points. They are live on the Lakeland Preparatory School website. They can go and keep up with the house points. They're actually very close. And there's not a large sample size for this, but I will say minor referrals. I think folks with students there know that a minor referral is kind of if a student does something that they shouldn't do and get a referral. At LP or in the 5th and 6th grade, those have dropped by 3 per day. So they're right now in the last couple of weeks they've had 3 fewer per day, actually to less than 1 per day. Is what the number's gone down to. So we're going to keep watching that and see if it keeps up. Lots of PLC or professional learning communities work going on as those systems are becoming more sophisticated and getting better data out of those. It's been exciting to watch. Speaking of data, Benchmark 2 has happened, the MVP benchmarks, and so we'll look forward to getting that information together and Mr. Adler presenting that to the board when it's appropriate. And finally, doing a lot of work at the Lakeland Prep High School to finalize the positions that are necessary for the 24-25 school year. We will post those in mid-January, most likely. As we typically post the positions prior to the budget being approved, so we can get a head start because we'll need between 12 and 15 probably new teachers just for that additional grade level. So that concludes my report.
Any questions, board? Childs.
I just had a comment. I've just been so impressed with the annex road and the footpath. I think parents are gonna just feel very safe when they see how it's separated from the road. If their students are walking alone, like for example, high school students that have a practice down there or something like that. So I think I think when parents really look at it and see it, they'll be very pleased with it.
Thank you.
I love the connectivity. I know we talked about these different pieces of land and how things would work, and so I love the overall vision that creates that as another part of campus and not a separate entity. So I think it opens up a lot of opportunities for groups to go down and have a safe way to get there and back.
Just feedback, and it was positive feedback from visiting teams that we had before the annex road was finished, we had the cut through for overflow parking for the annex area for that back area next to the field house or whatever. Have y'all had the discussions yet or the plans to kind of keep that cleared? Because I know there was some bush hogging and things like that went in to be able to have that while we were constructing the annex road. Has there been any discussion? Because that would be a great overflow parking when we have like event at the annex and not have to go back and clear it again or whatever in the future.
We have discussed that. There's actually another option that I'm looking at that might work even better that has to do with connecting the baseball and softball parking straight over to the annex road. So there's actually a place that could be a fairly short walk, and I don't want to, well, I don't think it matters. There's some space behind the softball field. There's kind of a slope there where I'm going to explore maybe if we could put some steps in and keep that cleared, and you could have a walk-through just straight across where you'd bypass, not having to go all the way around. I think that would be the quickest way to get where most folks want to go. But it is certainly also fairly easy, and we have talked about just keeping that cleared, over the course of the year.
What events are going to occur over
You know,
there?
you might need both. You might need,
Yes.
parking at both,
Yes.
for sure.
It was just a really convenient parking to just
I'm so
say,
glad.
like, put a sign up and say, here, park here, and then you can walk right to your fields, the back fields. So
Yep.
it was
I
really.
want to thank Jeremy Hayes, our Maintenance and
Yes.
Facilities Director, who basically took that on himself and made it happen, and did a great job.
Yes, had lots of compliments, so it
Great.
certainly worked
Wonderful.
out very well to be able to do that. Especially through the school year, even while we were doing constructions, it was really creative. So I'm appreciative of our staff looking at that, to be able to look at alternative ways and make it happen. So,
Excellent, thank you.
very appreciative of that. Any more discussion? Next item.
I will note the expense summary is there. There is one area where we're having some conversations. Our maintenance, facilities maintenance of plant line item is running a little hot right now. Some of that has to do with new fields coming online. We're now maintaining at a high level the softball, baseball, and band practice fields, which we weren't maintaining last year, and we need to make some adjustments that we will likely bring back to the board in January. But besides that, everything else is tracking the way it needs to.
Next item.
All right. The next item is the approval of the agenda.
So with the board's approval, I would like to actually add an item to the agenda. I would like to add a discussion and action on, as item number 8. I would like to make a motion to add discussion action on central office timeline. So I'll make the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to add that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So reminder, this is now an amended agenda. Is there anything else anyone would like to add to the agenda? That is number 8 on the discussion action. Is there anything anybody would like to remove from the consent agenda to the regular agenda? All right, hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. So the agenda is approved as amended. Well, next item.
Next item is the consent agenda. We have 8 items on the consent agenda.
I will ask again, is there anything anybody would like to remove from the consent agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item. And I'm trying to do so I apologize if I'm, because this one is not coming on and I keep forgetting that it's not. So I'm going to apologize if I keep shifting back and forth.
Next item under our discussion action items is approval of update to the 23-24 school board calendar.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion, I'll second. Dr. Orr, will you speak to this item?
I will. So per the conversation at the work session, our scheduled board meeting, which was going to be a business meeting with no work session in January, was going to be January 8th. That's just basically 2 days after everybody returns from the Christmas break, and we were thinking, the board had suggested that it might be advantageous to have a little extra time in there. It would also benefit the staff and give some extra time to prepare. After polling individually the members of the school board, 2 dates came up as options, and that was Tuesday the 16th and Wednesday the 17th. Wednesday the 17th appeared to have everybody on board that could do that one. So my recommendation would be to amend the calendar and move the monthly business meeting from Monday, January 8th to Wednesday, January 17th.
Since we didn't have the actual attachment, I'll make a motion to amend the board calendar to change the business meeting from January 8th to January 17th. Does that sound accurate? Okay, so I'll make a motion for that. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? What?
Second. Sorry, Mom.
It didn't pick him up.
Sorry about that. Are you good? Okay. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is the election of the policy committee.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion. I'll make a second. Dr. Horrell, will you speak to this item?
Yes, I'm recommending Tammy Bovee, Kim Lewis, and a board member to the policy committee. Deborah Thomas is currently serving and indicated at the work session her willingness to continue serving in that capacity.
And I know we had asked at last meeting about possibly looking at adding another person, so we had a middle school and high school potential representative.
We did, and I neglected to do that.
Okay.
So I apologize.
Okay.
We could certainly approve this
Yes.
group and then amend the committee for the next one.
Are there any nominations besides
Thomas,
Ms. Thomas?
go for it.
Would you be willing to serve?
I'd be happy to, yep.
Any more nominations? The floor is closed for nominations. So currently for the, oh my goodness, it's making a thing at me. So currently for the policy committee, we have Kim Lewis, Tammy Bovee, and Deborah Thomas as our
And a
board
person to be
representative.
named later.
That's
And
right.
a person to be named
And a
later.
person to be
I
named later at
apologize. That was my
a
fault.
future, we'll have that again on our January agenda. So all in favor of approving those three members and a fourth person to be named at a future date, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is election of the ethics committee.
I'll make a motion to get this item on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. This item actually, part of our policy, and I believe it's state law, the reference is to state law, that the school board chair serves as the representative to the Tennessee Election Commission. So and it also says that our school board chair will nominate the ethics committee. So I sent this to Dr. Horrell earlier, but I'll go ahead and let you know the list that I put together. It was myself, Jeremy Burnett, and Adam Henry as a member of the public. I don't know if you need, did we quote last time the actual policy? I can't remember if we quoted. I know you sent it to us in email, but the policy language, I think it said two, I think you did. I think you explained that it had two members of the board.
Two members
and
of the
then
board.
one
Yeah, that's
of the
right.
Yes, okay. I just want to make sure we covered it for the public as far as who made up the committee per policy. So my recommendation is myself, Jeremy Burnett, and Adam Henry. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is election of disciplinary hearing officers.
I'll make a motion to get this item on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Harrell?
Yes, I'm recommending Tammy Wilson, Kim Lewis, and Kim Pickens continue to serve as our DHA officers.
Is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion on scope conference applications.
I'll make a motion to get this item on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell?
To my knowledge, the student applications have not been released yet, but there was a invitation that we noted for board members who might have interest in reaching out.
Okay. So can we just carry this item over to our January agenda to get any further information on this? Would that be appropriate?
I think that'd be appropriate, yeah.
Okay. Any objection to that?
No objection.
And I think in the meantime, any board member that's interested can reach out to,
Okay.
I think it's Brittany
Brittany
Massey.
Massey.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
All right, so board members, if y'all have an interest, certainly reach out, and we will carry this over to our January agenda for any student, applicant, potential information we receive. All right, next item.
Next item is approval of resolution opposing the Education Freedom Act.
I'll make a motion to get this item on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Which one of y'all wants to speak? I'll let,
I have worked very closely with Ms. Childs on this, and I think she's probably prepared to speak on it,
I
and
am,
I'm
if
happy
that's
for her to
okay,
do that.
and then you can
Yeah, no, please.
piggyback. Okay, so before I go into the actual resolution, I did want to do a recap of what led us to this resolution. As I mentioned last week, The governor now has an initiative in which he plans to have a $7,000 per student starting next school year statewide voucher program. This would be separate from TISA, although we have very few details on what it's going to look like. After next school year, so the 25-26 school year, it has been stated there would be no income requirements. It would be a universal eligibility. This will include current private school students. Part of the reason that our board is bringing forth this resolution is the fact that this is not an evidence-based program, and I think that's one of the pieces that if you haven't kind of done for the public, if you haven't yet really done a deep dive into what this has looked like in other states that have rolled this out, it was surprising to me. There are only 2 states that actually do the same standardized test at the public school and the private schools that use the vouchers, and that's Louisiana and Indiana. And the students did worse at the private schools who were on vouchers on their standardized testing. Overall, they did worse as a whole, and then individually, they scored worse after going to the private school. This also was reflected in the state of Tennessee. Right now, there's a pilot with 3 school districts, including a local district, and the test scores from the private schools were worse, hands down. This included the ELA. That was a huge push last year that we heard all about the 3rd grade retention / change to promotion, and 77% of ESA participants, that's voucher students at private schools, 77% scored below or approaching, which was way worse than the average, than the public school students did across the state. Basically, one of the issues that is also concerning is that a lot of times, a lot of these states don't have transparency. So parents use the voucher, they put their kids in a private school, and they just don't know that their students actually achieving worse academically. So you'll see sometimes that, they'll quote parent satisfaction, but unfortunately, a lot of times the parents don't also have the whole picture like public schools are required to do and say, this is objectively how your student has been performing. Like we have seen locally with charter schools where, they would start up and then fail, and then the students would end up returning to the public schools. This has happened on a much larger scale in the states that have private school vouchers. They would, over a 24-year period in Milwaukee, 41% of the startup private schools closed down. In Louisiana, there are essentially shadow public schools where 100% of the students are on vouchers and low-performing private schools. Also, voucher students don't remain voucher students for long. 20 to 30% leave, and then they end up going back to public schools. So it's not a sustainable situation. Also, the fiscal cost in Arizona, which is a state that just passed the universal voucher, the original estimate was $30 million a year. This year, it's $900 million. So basically what's happened is you're shifting the cost of private education students to the taxpayers. And, I do want to also note that, the municipal schools in Shelby County have really been a positive economic factor here. And I think that's, an important thing to also note. So I will also say that when we get to the legislative agenda, which is coming next, I will talk a little bit more about the A through F grading. But right now, I just want to give a recap about the voucher and, what went into looking at this resolution. I also want to thank Carterville Schools because we did use a lot of their language. Some of it's different, but we used quite a bit of it, so. And do you want to piggyback in questions?
I'll just speak just a little bit about the
Okay, please
content
do.
of the resolution itself. I mean, I won't read it word for word certainly, but as Ms. Childs mentioned in the whereas clauses, it says that vouchers is not an evidence-based practice. Anything we've said that diverts funds or even potentially diverts funds from our public education system in the state of Tennessee, we oppose, and as we have. It points out something that is the lack of equity. We serve every student that's eligible to attend Lakeland school system. Every student. If they live in the city of Lakeland, we serve them. That's not the same situation with private schools that might receive these tax dollars as well. A lot of those students that are not eligible for private schools are the ones with the greatest needs that we serve. So anything that takes funds away from those students, we oppose strongly. We need the funds. We need more funds, in fact, to educate those students and others. We feel like, as Ms. Child said, we're fully transparent in terms of what is happening in our schools, what the results are in our schools, whether we like them or not. They're shared publicly. Parents have the opportunity to do a deep dive into our data. That's not the same thing that would happen under this proposal with private schools receiving these funds. And we believe that all schools that receive taxpayer dollars should have the same accountability. We have increasingly, even over the course of the 10 years where I've been superintendent, every year, the legislature drops new requirements on us that make it more difficult for us to make our own decisions about how to educate children or how much time should be spent on certain topics or even who can do the educating of the children. Certainly is a very, very different situation. As we've noted, as it becomes harder and harder to attract teachers, licensure requirements are often becoming stricter. In most private schools, very technically, I'm not saying they're not qualified or they're not good teachers, but very technically, they don't have to have any sort of certification or even, education requirements to teach in those schools. So if they're going to receive public school funds, they should have the same requirements. They don't require the same standardized testing. So essentially what this says is we urge the Tennessee General Assembly to reject the Education Freedom Scholarship Act or similar voucher initiatives. And if the board passes this, then we will get a clean copy together and get that to the governor, each member of the Tennessee General Assembly, and the Commissioner of Education.
If I start?
Go ahead.
Just a couple of questions. One, the board, not the board, but the group that pushes down the initiatives for the school systems, is that the Department of Education for the state of Tennessee?
Well, for the most part, the requirements originate in the legislature, and the typical, sometimes with a proposal from the governor, sometimes not. They start in the legislature, and typically what the laws say is they will have the parameters, and then it will require the State Board of Education to implement the requirements. So most of the time, and at that point, the Department of Education would work with the State Board to put those requirements in place. And then ultimately, it's the State Board of Education that's responsible for kind of making sure that these things are happening.
So top down, coming from the state down to the different school levels?
Yes.
So
It's definitely top down, for sure.
Yes. So, and yet they are unhappy. I'm assuming that's why they're making this push for vouchers. So they've created these rules that they're unhappy with the results. Okay.
Correct. And I will also note that even though we have a new funding mechanism, we are continuing to advocate for full funding. We still don't feel like we have full funding, as we've noted in previous resolutions. We don't receive any consistent money at all for our preschool students. We have 3 preschool classrooms. We're contemplating if we're going to need a 4th preschool classroom. There are actually more students that are showing up as eligible for the federally required special education preschool than there ever have been. So we have some speculation that it may have to do with COVID, that the students did not have access to the kind of even early childhood education that they might have had before. So more students are popping up as eligible. We are required to educate them. We are happy to do it. We would love to have the funding, though, that accompanies students. These are full-time students in our preschool. They come every single day, and they are not accounted for in TISA at all. So again, if these extra funds are available, as we keep hearing that they are, we feel pretty strongly that we'd like to get that funding. We feel strongly that teachers should make more money than they do. In fact, there's laws that say that they're going to have to make more money, at least the minimum amount, in 3 years, but those funds have not yet been allocated. So our question is, if all this money is available, why don't we fully fund our public schools first?
Understand? Yeah, and support our resolution as it's written. I feel like it's very defined. There's not an even playing field here. The leaders that are putting the initiatives out are not holding everybody to the same standards. And I really but I really appreciate all that you've done in putting this together, and thank you. There's still a fixed cost that exists for the school system. And just because you take students away, it doesn't mean that obligation is going to reduce. There's still fixed costs that have to be maintained. So, just from a financial standpoint, I foresee this not being what they think it's going to be from a cost level. It's going to be, in true government style, it's going to be more than what they feel like it's going to be. So I support this. I appreciate your work, and I look forward to approving it.
You wouldn't mind notating in the record that Mr. Burnett, Vice Chair Burnett, has arrived. Okay, thank you.
So is the $7,000, is that supposed to be, is that the 6,860 that are those equivalent? Is that where he got the 7,000? I'm just kind of curious. Do we know?
I think it came honestly from Arizona, because they're doing 7,000 approximately. But it's not, to be clear, it won't be from TISA, but obviously we will have less funding, any school district will have less funding if there are, universal voucher, especially, and I should note too, not just with the special education preschool, but, some students under IEPs require quite a bit more than, any funding that is allotted. And so those are the kind of unfunded mandates we have that, when you take from the whole, when you have less money, then it becomes more difficult to serve those children with special education. But as far as like exactly how they got $7,000, because it is less actually than what the current pilot is, but.
Okay, I was just curious if that was a coincidence or if he was trying to sort of equate that's the value of a student's public education, like that's the number we're using.
Details are very, very slim.
They are.
I will note that, so
Yeah.
don't hold me to anything. I do think that, I think it's probably a combination. I mean, I think our number probably came from Arizona as far as the base, but I do think that's probably what they're considering a rough equivalent of maybe base plus, because there might be other factors in there. It is supposed to be a unique, not a unique, but an individual amount that matches that student's characteristics, so that it wouldn't be exactly the same. I mean, under the reason they go to a model like TISA is because every student generates a certain amount of funding, and whatever they generate in the public schools is presumably what they would be able to carry to the private schools. But one of the big question marks, though, is right now, students who are attending private schools aren't generating any money. So, if they're saying they are also now going to generate money, where does that money come from? What's the fiscal note there? Again, details are slim.
So is this still the same money that was discussed that we have in surplus allegedly that would backfill if we were to say to the federal government, we no longer want the federal money? Is this the same kind of pool we're talking about? We have no idea.
Couldn't speak to that.
Well, I'm with Keith that although there are a lot of municipalities who and on their own when it comes to giving kids a good education. It's not that we're worried about this for Lakeland, we're worried about this for all public schools. Most of us, we're products of public schools, we represent public schools, we have our kids in public schools, and I think that anything that makes it harder for us to educate our kids is, that we should reject, and so I appreciate the resolution.
To speak to the funding, again, there's really no details, but all that's been said is that it will be a minimum of 10,000 scholarships, and then it will increase over time until every student of the 1 million students who are in public and private throughout Tennessee who want one can get one. Now, of course, it doesn't mention at all that a lot of them would not be eligible if they have extreme special education needs or, behavioral issues or bad grades that a private school wouldn't accept. There's no mention about what about those students, but that was what's been said. It has not been said like how it will be funded, just that it is separate from TISA.
So the name Education Freedom Act, the fact is that the $7,000 won't touch what it costs to get into a lot of private schools.
That is correct. The governor had a student from Shelby County at his press conference, and that student's parent is paying $23,000 minus the $7,000 vouchers. So that was the example given of the two students that were there. So
It's not of choice, really. I mean, it's where you can take that $7,000 and think that you can do better than public schools, right? I mean,
yes, and I will also say, I come from social work, and historically, it's a field where for many years, people had good intentions and just did things like, oh, well, we think this will work and let's just do it. And a lot of times it had really tragic results, how children were just kind of whisked away from their families. And I think this is the part that's the most dismaying to me because it's just not evidence-based. That would be something that I think to study at some point on, why it hasn't worked in the states where there is the same test so you can see what that looks like. There's probably a number of reasons for that, but I think that's the part, when people really want to dig into, is this something, as a parent we should support or not support? I would just look carefully at everything, because I was carefully reading the governor's website, and there were things stated like 83% of parents approved this, but the fact was it was misleading at best, because public school wasn't a choice given. It was just 83% of the school choices given would prefer ESAs over other scholarships and vouchers. So, things like that, I think, again, if this program is that great, then, the evidence should be behind it to change the trajectory of the state of Tennessee like this. Because it's really devastating to kids when they constantly change schools. I mean, that's one of the things we do have evidence on, and we also can see that these kids often are going to change schools. They're not going to necessarily be successful at that school, and then they're going to be going to another school, and that's really devastating and traumatic for students. So it's just, yeah. Anyway, I could keep going on, but let me know if you have more questions, because hopefully I can answer those.
Thank you all for being patient with me and waiting for this incredibly important topic till I got here. I'm sure I missed some of the other comments, but I agree with everything I've heard since I've been here. Having read through the resolution, I agree with every whereas on here, and fully support our resolution, and encourage anyone and everyone to email our state level representatives and have conversations with them. I plan on having conversations with them as well. And it's just devastating to me, even being considered. it's a bad idea all around.
Dr. Horrell, one thing I would like to request as part of the vote on this item is that perhaps either, I think Ms. Childs would certainly like to work on it, to educate our parents if we could, or, you know, via social media and via communication. So after we go through the process of voting and if the board votes to pass this resolution, I would like for information, certainly succinct, because I know there's a lot to absorb, but succinct things for our parents to be able to get this information and then also be able to share with them email addresses like we talked about last time, so that if they feel compelled to, that they can communicate with their lawmakers. And I would like to share that also with the Lakeland community, because this affects all taxpayers. This doesn't just affect just the Lakeland parents that go to Lakeland school system. This affects all taxpayers because this is their public funds. And one thing that I did want to ask, so for the transparency part of it, and I guess I'm just going to ask about it, the current system. Is there transparency regarding curriculum that is taught at whatever these voucher schools are, or is there transparent? I mean, what kind of, I hear say like there's not really discussion, but I would like to, as far as like accountability, but also the transparency. I mean, like if there's not requirements, if they're not required to have certified teachers, you know, whatever their certification needs to be, if they aren't required to put their curriculum out there and publish it and say what books are okay to read, is there been any discussion by the governor or any of the legislature to change those facts, or is it sound like, or is it at this point it's like it's going to be an expansion of what it currently exists? Is that what I'm hearing at least, or is there kind of, it's real muddy?
It includes unaccredited private schools. I mean, and it also includes homeschoolers. So, no, there will not be that.
So somebody could send their kid to a school thinking, not realizing that they don't teach basic standards of math or English or whatever, that they may teach something completely different, but the title of the school may, and then the public funds would be potentially diverted to this school.
That's an
Yes.
accurate scenario,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to go on the record, say I'm really saddened that this is the state of I feel like it's just another, I hate to use the word attack, but that's the only word I can think of off the top of my head on public schools. Our teachers, our students, our families work really, really hard to not only bounce back from COVID, which is essentially, I mean, we're still bouncing back from COVID. We've made incredible gains to try to bounce back from the COVID pandemic and the measures we all had to go through. To then elevate their education level, to try to go past, that whole full lap that we talked about and go past that whole full lap. And I feel like this is just an attack on our families and other families, not only just Lakeland's, but Shelby County's or in the state of Tennessee, any family that is trying really hard, because we're going to divert funds, as we said, away from public schools, and there are costs associated with educating children, such as the pre-K programs, that aren't funded through the state of Tennessee. And if they have the money, why aren't they funding these programs? I mean, if there's just this extra money around, I don't understand why they don't fund these programs. You have it to send somewhere to a private school, why don't you educate the kids you got and pay to educate the kids you got? So it's really disheartening on what things have come to. I think meeting with the legislatures last year, some of them before the session started, one of the biggest things, or my biggest takeaways was there are things like this that we aren't going to change their mind, they're going to do. But we also need to talk about how can we make it better? Like the third grade retention, they asked, how could we make third grade retention laws better? So through this conversation or through this work with the legislature, I certainly am completely opposed to this, but I also would like this board to keep in mind in our conversations with lawmakers, how can we make this at least the level playing field, like the accountability, the certifications, have to take the same test, A through F letter grades, all the things have to fund. One of the things that I'm really sad that I haven't seen in any of this is they don't have to fund or don't have to educate someone that has a disability. They're not required to take a student that has a disability. And that is really, something that I feel like, I don't understand why, if it is so important that this be made available for every child in Tennessee, then why wouldn't you mandate that a school taking voucher have to take a student with whatever kind of disability that they come along with? That should be yet another mandate. If that's a mandate on a public school system, why are we not mandating that on a private school system?
Or could we at least take away some of these onerous
Correct.
requirements that have been placed
Correct.
on public schools? I mean, can there be a conversation on that? Can we have more flexibility? I mean,
Yeah,
instead
a
of
lot-
less?
Yes, a lot of what you just said. Stay tuned for the next one. We're going to come to our legislative agenda. But I will also say it is disheartening because, things are just said, oh, well, free market, but it's not, because you're tying public schools' hands in just, with all of the requirements and all of the things that have to be done and the lack of funding for special education. And then you're saying this is great for all 1 million students, but it's not, because a significant number will not be eligible to do this type of program. And, looking at just the holistic child and, the most vulnerable children, and just ignoring those with this, which is absolutely what it's doing. So it's really just, it's going to be, if it's passed the way that it's being proposed, it will be a significant fiscal note, a significant additional burden on taxpayers. And I think a lot of people that I've seen social media comments don't realize that, it is being stated to include current private school students. So I don't know how the fiscal note would not, the tax burden on taxpayers would not be a lot, like we've seen in other states, like Arizona, that's done this. I will come back to the legislative agenda on the next thing, but are there any other comments or questions about the resolution itself?
Does the rest of the board have any more comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor of passing the resolution opposing the Educational Freedom Act, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is approval of the 2024 legislative agenda.
I'll make a motion to get this item on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Childs, do you want to speak to this, or Dr. Horwath?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Got a big show tonight. Got a lot to
know.
talk about.
I know. Okay, I do want to, I want to mention, at this point, the A through F grading system. So I myself was a little confused, like, how did it change? What's different about it? As Dr. Horl said, this was law passed in 2016. It got delayed and delayed and delayed. That was the Tennessee testing glitches that happened, and then the pandemic. And there were town halls, there was hundreds of public comments made, and then we found out only last month that all of a sudden it was going to be a new setup. And so TSBA sent me some information on, what it was supposed to be and then what it changed to be, so that I could have it clear in my head. I put together a little chart that everyone has. The top half is what the new version is that Dr. Hole mentioned. We'll find out tomorrow, and then it'll go public in a couple weeks. And the bottom is what it was going to be. It had a number, like I said, a number of input on it. So it was a little bit different for K through 8 and for high school, but as you can see, a lot of different pieces got deleted from it. I did want to mention on the high school, it was supposed to have 25% was going to be ready graduate and graduation rate, and instead that got knocked down to 10% on college and career readiness. And I find that a bit dismaying too, because, in the governor's website that talks about the part of the reason why these school vouchers are so important is that educational attainment. But, you know, I don't understand why that wouldn't be an important thing to consider for high schools if that's, you know, one of these big goals in this program. So again, it's going to distill it to one grade. TSBA, with their legislative agenda, is asking that they, in the future, it won't be now, but that they change it to include the subsections so parents have a better picture. I don't know if, you know, they'll be amenable to that as well, but again, it's going to be a pretty skewed one-letter grade, and, you know, and we're told so that it can be easy for parents to see what that school stacks up as, but, you know, when they're comparing their public schools to the private schools, they will not be subject to this grading system at all. And I'll also note that in Louisiana, where the students they take the same standardized test, you know, there's been a lot of information, but, you know, some of the reporters went to parents and said, what do you think about the fact that your student went from a C public school to an F private school if they, you know, use the same metrics? And the parents were shocked because they didn't know that they were performing so much worse. So again, public schools are going to have this grading system that suddenly got changed with no input from any school systems or the public. But the private schools are not going to have this same grading system either. So that is part of the accountability that is you will see on the legislative agenda. Also, there are no details that the third grade promotion standards are going to be required by law with this new voucher system. As I mentioned before, the third graders that are right now using the vouchers for those 3 school districts perform substantially worse than their public school peers. So we're also asking, if they're going to pass this, that they would have the same standardized testing requirements. They would publicly post those results so that parents could have an easy, timely, and informed way to make decisions for their students. You know, so they can make these decisions. Oh, they are doing better here, or wow, they did a lot worse at this school that I changed them to. Under education funding, as we mentioned before, again, something won't be covered by vouchers. The special education preschool funding that we're required to, you know, educate those preschool special education students and their typical peers is totally unfunded by the new TISA. And I also just wanted to mention, we're asking that the General Assembly permanently revoke the law prohibiting being able to issue waivers for teachers with EOC classes. Again, another arduous standard that private schools will not have that have these vouchers. Again, the waiver part would be, you know, subject to them, you know, the Department of Education saying, oh yeah, this makes sense that you would want a waiver for this particular teacher. So that's kind of the gist of the legislative agenda. So I don't know if you want to add to it, and then let me know what questions everyone has.
I think I appreciate it. This was based on feedback from board members. A lot of it's consistent with positions we've taken in the past, but certainly updated to what we're hearing are going to be the hot topics there. So I think this basically sticks to this board's overall feeling that there should not be unfunded mandates, that there should be more flexibility, not less. We need to do things that make it easier to hire teachers and to keep teachers and take care of kids. So I think it's very consistent with the overall mission and previous messages of the boards. So, and again, I appreciate Ms. Childs putting so much work into it as well.
Discussion?
It's interesting to me, the A through F conversation. Everything I've seen suggests that everybody's schools are going to score poorly, and so arrival of this A through F and the vouchers, it makes it look like we're going to show you how bad your public schools are, and we're going to give you this money to get out of them. And so I just want to tell everybody out there in Lakeland, If you're watching, don't believe what you see when those letter grades come out. We don't know what they're gonna be, but just based on our conversations, I think that it's meant to make us look bad. And I wanna say to all of our teachers, keep doing what you're doing, because you're doing the Lord's work in those schools every single day.
I want to add to what Ms. Thomas said, in agreement with her. I'm going to quote one of my favorite professors and mentors for graduate school. Figures never lie, but liars sure can figure. And to change these metrics at the last minute, knowing that they already had the data in hand, they changed the metrics to tell the story they wanted to tell, not tell a fair accounting, which is what was probably the original intent of this legislation. And I would wonder out loud, did the Department of Education follow the law in coming out with these new metrics? Because I've heard conversations that they supposed to go through a certain process, and they didn't follow the process, and the process is part of TCA. Is that correct?
It is correct, and in fact, I'm not an attorney, but I do know that the law said that the school systems were supposed to get the metrics prior to the school year in which they were being evaluated. We did not only got them in advance of last year, we didn't even get them in advance of following year. I mean, it's, the numbers are
told
being
us it
run
changed.
in real time. I mean, not in real time, they're being run totally after the fact, in a way that, as has been suggested, allows folks that are interested in portraying schools in a particular light to do it however they want to.
On why they changed it, or the timeline has not been transparent.
For me, I look at all these things, and I'd say to the leaders and the people in the offices in Nashville, let our teachers teach. Let them do what they know. This is what they've been trained on. They are being pushed to train on tests. They're being pushed to train on different things that do not improve the education. Let our administrators lead the schools in a way they know. Hold everybody to the same standards. These are the things that are not being done. You're asking our school system and others to hold to a different standard than what you are with the private schools, or the homeschoolers, or the charter schools. I ask you, if you want to do it fairly. But let our teachers teach. They will not let you down.
Us make decisions that help them do that.
Yes.
I would like to add, again, same conversation as the resolution about the Education Freedom Act. I would like for some communication, and I assume that the board is supportive of that as well. Communication about this to go out to our families and potentially the Lakeland public, or whatever avenues we have to be able to communicate, to make sure that we're clear and concise about how this came to be and how transparent it was not.
How illegitimate it is.
Yes, how it was not, and how it was, certainly, my goal is not to, my goal would be to educate parents and educate families, because this is their tax dollars too. It's not just my tax dollars, not just Mr. Burnett or Dr. Horrell. It's everybody who lives in the state of Tennessee. This is their tax dollars, and this is what their legislatures vote on, and support or don't support. And so from a voting member of the public, I certainly would like to be able to communicate and educate, so that when election time comes around next year, that everybody has a clear understanding of what all has transpired this year, because there is an election next year. So I hope that the people in Nashville will also listen to their voting public to say, some of these things are just completely dumbfounding us, but also some of the behaviors are unacceptable. If I was sitting up here and I decided tomorrow or yesterday that we're going to do this in the Lakeland school system, I think parents would have an uprising if it was after the fact and after they, weren't given appropriate information and far enough advance to prepare for it and everything else, I think parents would have an uprising against us, and I'm hoping educating parents maybe, or community members, that they will communicate with their legislators in Nashville to say this is unacceptable how this has transpired, and we expect more accountability, more transparency in all facets, and especially when you're dealing with our money, because it's all of our money. It's not just their money, it's our money. It's all of ours. So with that being said, is there any more discussion on the 2024 legislative agenda?
Just thank you for putting this together. Appreciate that.
All in favor of approving the legislative agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on the central office timeline.
I'll make a motion to get this item on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell, you and I have briefly discussed this. You want to touch on it, or you want to just kind of, actually, I can start it out. So the central office timeline, so we've talked about vouchers today, and we've touched on TISA, and we've touched on construction projects, so we've touched on all three. So some of the things that I would certainly like to, or one of the things I would like to bring before this board is potentially updating the central office timeline, keeping it in our 5-year capital improvement plan, but potentially not having it in we're in fiscal year 24. Am I saying that right? Okay, make sure I had the right fiscal year. Potentially putting it into fiscal year 25, so that we have a better understanding of how these vouchers are going to play out, what that's going to mean to funding, because I think that's a huge question mark right now with everybody on what the state funding is going to look like. I think there's some questions. I think we've gotten a better understanding of TISA, but I think there's still some questions about TISA and what this new funding mechanism is going to look like. And we also have a significant road project, which you spoke about in your report. And I know in the last road project we had some issues that came up, bad dirt, things like that. So that we haven't gotten to that phase of this with this current road project. And so with at least those three things, and I'm sure the board might, I don't know if the board has more, but those three things impending, I would like to propose to the board that we push the central office project to at least fiscal year 25 and evaluate once we get more firm information on TISA, more firm information on vouchers, and at least see where we're at closer to the end of this construction project financially, and make sure we're ready to expend those funds. So that's my proposal, and that's what I'm making a motion to do. Proposing to do. Mr. Burnett.
Dr. Roll, you and I have talked about this as well. And in our conversation, I think you told me that you're prepared to guide your staff on maybe doubling up or having some alternative work schedules, whatever it looked like, to remain, but decrease your footprint in the building if need be, if we needed to delay this any.
Yes, we have options. We as I've said many times, we overbuilt at Lakeland Prep. We wanted to make sure that we had plenty of space. Right now, we're spread out in about 10 offices, but you know, if you visited my office, it's a full classroom. It could easily accommodate 3, typical size offices. It would take some work to do, but not nearly the amount of, cost that it would take to build the central office. So we are prepared to explore those options and move forward with them. We feel comfortable. We could even stay as we are. We feel like through all of next year, if we had to, but I think we'd probably go ahead and move forward with something that would be a little more long-term than that, if that's the direction this board goes. And I do, for context, and I know we talked about this some time ago, but one of the conversations that we had on multiple levels when the board was contemplating the district office was, where does that leave our fund balance? And, how much wiggle room does that give us as things come up and as maybe unexpected things come up? We know there was a $250,000 surprise from TDEC when it came to Campus Drive. They're just now starting to clear, as I mentioned. We don't know what the dirt situation is going to be in there. It could be significant. So I think the spirit of the conversations I've had with is it worth pushing that fund balance at this point? But I will say, and I feel comfortable saying this on behalf of the staff, we will make it work. We're comfortable making it work. We've been doing it for a long time. It was not This is not something that certainly I or we have really been pushing for, and we want to do what's in the best interest of the school system, so make it work.
Any discussion on my proposal?
I think it's a great idea. Let's share responsibility, and let's stick to that.
All in favor of pushing the, let me make sure I say it right, pushing the timeline out to FY '25 for the central office project, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
No further items on the agenda as amended.
Announcements. I think Dr. Horl made the biggest announcement is that we have a week from Wednesday. That's the
right.
biggest one, I think, of the night.
Uh-huh.
That everybody is going to go on break and celebrate, and we're going to get all the videos of everybody cheering as they leave. So I think that's the hugest announcement of the night. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned.